Hey everybody, welcome. I want to start on time because I want to make sure I also get you out of here on time. I want to be respectful to your time as well. Normally I start with this presentation, because this for me is the 6th time, with, whoa, you went to the one psychology talk on a tech conference. But this is build stuff, this is probably your 10th psychology talk, and apparently you can't get enough. Super excited you're here. I'm not a psychologist, I'm a consultant at Xebia. My name is Matthijs, that's a very Dutch name, that's because I'm Dutch. Shout out all the Dutch people in the room. But something happened that made me do an insanely stupid amount of research, meaning I read research of people much smarter than me about automation bias and why our brains are not equipped to deal with reviewing any kind of computer output efficiently, and especially with Gen AI. But the reason that I'm doing this, the reason that I'm here, is because I made a whoopsie, and I made a spectacular whoopsie. If you don't know, if you want to speak at a conference like Build Stuff, you will have had to answer a CFP like 5 months ago. And a CFP is really just you write an abstract, a title, 1-2 paragraphs, what you're going to talk about, 3 if you're fancy, and you send that over. And then maybe eventually you'll be on a stage. So I thought, I'm not very good at short form writing, like I can't write a tweet for the life of me. The information's quite high information density, it has to be engaging, but it can't be too hyped. I'm just not good at it. So I thought, I'll use ChatGPT, like a lot of people are doing nowadays. But I thought, I'm very smart. I'm not. We're going to find out why. But I thought I'm very smart, and I'm just going to give ChatGPT all the examples of abstracts that I wrote and I do like, and then I'm going to ask it, you ask me questions, and I will answer the questions, out will roll an abstract, and I will conquer the world. I did not conquer the world. I saw an abstract roll out 3 paragraphs, and I thought, this is great. Submitted it to a bunch of conferences, and was accepted to, in this case, NDC Oslo. I was excited, was on my bucket list. I fly there 5 months later, sit down at a community event the day before, and I say community event, it was really just geeks at a bar. Next to me sits down a man who says, I'm in the speaker committee. I select all the sessions, and I say, well, I'm speaking, and he asks, so what are you speaking about? And I give him the first 3 words of the title of my session. He says, oh, I know you. And that is not a good sign, because you looked at today's agenda and you saw my name and you have no clue who I am, right? So for somebody to tell me, like, oh, I know who you are, that's a big red flag. I said, oh, do tell. I said, yeah, because the whole organization has been talking about your session today on Slack, because they do not understand how you got selected. It was so obviously written with ChatGPT, that abstract, I don't know how it happened. Yeah, at this moment, I'm thinking, if the earth would just swallow me up, that would be absolutely dandy. But it got worse, because he thought, and this was Glenn, by the way. Glenn's a great guy. I'm making him the villain of this story. It was obviously my problem. He speaks at this event, go watch his stuff. But he makes it worse. He starts reading my abstract to the table. And this is the first time in 5 months that I hear the hot garbage that I created. I'm going to give you the first paragraph of 3, because I won't give you the full thing. It's really terrible. But the first paragraph, and I'll read it, will go like this. In an era where technology and mindfulness intersect, the power of AI is reshaping how we approach app development. This session delves into the fascinating world of utilizing artificial intelligence to expedite and streamline the development process of a mobile meditation app. Again, that's 1 of 3 paragraphs, and you've learned nothing about what it is that I wanted to talk about. I'm making the audience do the homework of figuring out, what's this guy going to speak on? That anybody showed up for that talk was amazing. For me, the words that I have here in yellow, they represent to me the stuff that I see in so many abstracts that are generated with Gen AI, and I can't unsee it anymore. That in an era. It's a session abstract, not a movie trailer, right? I see it everywhere. It's like, in a world. This reshaping and delving, those are just words that GPT really associates with tech abstracts, and it will keep throwing them at you. Look at today's calendar, look at the agenda of any event, you will see this stuff pop up everywhere. I'm not saying it's bad if these words happen, but if they continuously happen, yeah, somebody's been a bit sloppy. I've been sloppy. And fascinating world, expediting and streamlining, that's not how I talk. It's both too excited and too corporate at the same time. That's not me in that abstract. So I did the session, went home, and figured out how to improve on this. At the end of the session, I'll have some stuff that I do as a software developer to make stuff better. But really, this year has been all about figuring out what is automation bias, how does it work, and why did I make these mistakes in the first place? So this for me, this for you is just a presentation. For me, this is sort of my redemption tour, and this is the finale of it. This is the last time I'll do this, and then I will rejoin you as a responsible adult with Gen AI. Automation bias, then, is a form of cognitive bias. Cognitive bias is basically how we get information, what we see, what we hear, what we smell, and how we label that based on a bunch of stuff that's happening in our head that's sort of biased towards one way or another. And I realize at my finale, I'm on the first row, I have a neuroscientist. This is really annoying, but that's my understanding of cognitive bias. There are like 70 of them. These are just categories of cognitive bias. A couple of ones that I really like. Confirmation bias is when you just accept something based on what you already believed. So if you've ever had an argument with a friend, and after half an hour you feel that phone burning in your pocket, and you're like, I'm gonna Google it. And you Google your stuff, and you're like, I'm right. And then your friend's like, oh, I'm gonna Google it too, and they say, I'm right. How does that happen? You both just accepted the stuff that you already believed, and you're using it as evidence against each other. Logical fallacy, one of my favorites, is where gambling fallacy lies. So based on previous events, you just assume that the next event must have a certain outcome. You flip a coin 10 times, 9 times it was tails, the next time will be heads, must be, right? It's not. But that's our brains playing a trick on us. The same thing with self-assessment. Self-assessment is where imposter syndrome lives, right? So basically what brought us all here. We're not thinking we're good enough, so we come to a conference because we're smart enough to know we lack information. Automation bias then sits in false priors. And this is where initial beliefs and knowledge, I'll read this because it's a long quote, they interfere with the unbiased evaluation of factual evidence and lead to incorrect conclusions. So even though you might have the evidence, you still are incapable of making the right decision based on it. Automation bias then, very simply put, overly relying on machine-generated decisions and proposals. So a machine, whether that's a traffic light or whether it's ChatGPT, is telling you something and you too readily say, looks good to me. One more scientific description that I'll give you is the human inclination to give undue weight to recommendations or decisions generated by automated systems, even in situations where information provided by the systems is incorrect or human judgment would have been more accurate. That inclination and undue weight, that is a cognitive bias, right? You're pulled into a certain direction. Automated systems, doesn't matter what it is, we're just not great at reviewing this, and human judgment would have been better, and especially in the case of that abstract, if I had just read that a day later, would have saved me a lot of trouble. Although this presentation wouldn't exist. Now, we're at a tech conference, and we're talking a lot about AI and machine learning, so maybe you've heard about model bias. I just want to make very sure that we speak the same language. Model bias, where a AI model is more likely to give you a thing rather than another thing, is a technical problem. Automation bias is a brain problem. It's also something none of you can escape. We can make it a little bit better, but you're not going to escape it. But they like to go hand in hand sometimes. But model bias, to give you an example, if you ask an image generator, give me an image of somebody writing with their left hand, it's very likely you'll get something like this. And I like this one more, if you ask of a picture of an analog wristwatch, and let's say the time should be 5:15, you'll probably get this. Does anybody know why, this last one? Advertisement photos, yeah. The data set of all of these images, they have a lot of images of wristwatches, but those are most likely marketing images. And the most likely marketing image is 10:10. Now they'll say, marketing specialists, that's because the logo is clearly shown and it's nice and symmetrical. I say it's because happy. That's why I think everybody does 10:10, but that's why it's so difficult to get any other image than 10:10. That is model bias. Fun examples, but they can get a lot more serious though. Are there any Austrians in the room? No Austrians in the room. I can also tell because last time I had Austrians in the room, they all saw this and they went, the AMS is from the Austrian Employment Service. And they thought, let's make a model that helps a caseworker decide whether a job seeker should get any kind of training to make them more likely to get back on the job market. So imagine you're sitting there, somebody comes in, and the system basically is telling you, oh, they are in category 1, they should get an expensive training, or an inexpensive training, or no training at all. They started making this in 2018, and through some kind of Public Information Act, we got to see what that model was actually doing because they trained some kind of machine learning model. If you don't know German, I will translate this, but basically this is how the model worked. On the right-hand side are labels, and if that label is true for you, you might get points deducted, or you get points added. I'm going to translate them, the most important ones. You walk into this room, and you're a woman, that's points deducted. It's not great model bias. The older you get, the more points are deducted. You might claim these people need, if you are getting older, you might need more training to get back on the job market. No, this model is saying, let's punish them. If you're an immigrant, that's fine. As long as you're from the EU, you get extra points. If you're from anywhere else, not great, right? And this is real software that they try to bring out. If you're impaired in any way, points deducted. If you have a kid or you're caring for somebody, points deducted. So given that a man and a woman walk into a room, it's not a start of a joke, this is just how this model works. Yeah, as a woman, you are behind. So they based this on some kind of data and they said, yeah, but it's correct. But it's also making sure that people who are already discriminated against will keep getting discriminated against. Luckily, though, they made this in 2018. It was delayed because of COVID. That wasn't the reason. It was because a lot of people started protesting. It's still being protested again today, but it never went to production, which is good for all of us. This never made it. But I'm from the Netherlands, and there somebody else thought of a similar system, and that did make it to production. Dutch people in the room? I've seen one. No, you're not. I've seen one. We have a system that if you have kids and you don't make a lot of money, you might be eligible for money from the government. Good system. However, the government noticed people are committing fraud with this stuff. So what do? We automate the shit out of it. We made a system that basically automatically flagged when people were likely fraudsters. However, it didn't work. It was so biased against people that we were already discriminating against, like people with an immigration background, that they were required to give the money back. These are people that needed that money, so they didn't have any means to repay. That makes you a criminal, because now you can't pay the fine that we're putting on you. This meant that kids were placed outside of their homes, because we believed the system was doing the right thing. We all believed, yeah, this system is helping us. We didn't review it correctly. Eventually, this was one of the big reasons our government crashed in 2023. So this is kind of like the impact this stuff can have if you have your model bias and your automation bias go hand in hand. Automation bias is a flaw that we have, but it's not the error. The error you make because of this automation bias. But the thing is, even though you're not wired to do this job correctly, it's still your fault if you make an error. And errors come sort of in two different categories. One is an error of commission. That means the machine is telling you, here's a bunch of information, and you make the wrong decision based on that information. Errors of omission, then, is when you get information, but the stuff that you needed wasn't there. To give a few examples of this, very easy one is spell check. And spell check actually comes in two flavors. If you use Grammarly or some kind of grammar tool, it might tell you, oh, you should rewrite this message because it's not formal enough. Here's how you can rewrite it. But if that was a message to a friend, that would make no sense, but that would be an error of commission. But if you type a word and it just automatically replaces it with another word, that could be an error of omission, where it didn't tell you why it did that. Spell check never really did much wrong. You get funny examples. You might get something like this. Or you might send a strange text to your mom. But that's as far as it's going to go. But we have so much more automation to fool us, it's really easy to find examples of where this happens. For instance, if you think people will never drive into a lake because of GPS, you're wrong. They will gladly do that. So restaurant staff rescues couple who drove into water after getting confused by GPS directions. And if you think, yeah, okay, you found this, but that's a one-off. No, it's not. Right here, this person is an American tourist in Hawaii, drove into a harbor. And she said, well, I saw there was water there, but the GPS said go. And on the other side, there was a car. That car was on a dock somewhere on the other side of the harbor, and she just went, phew. Not the last time that happened, right? Happened again. And my favorite example, or actually my favorite headline would be this: driver claims GPS navigation sent him in a lake, so he obeyed. I love this because this This keeps happening, but it mostly keeps happening in the US. And I apparently you all know why. I don't, but the country takes a sudden right turn every once in a while. But this is here. The one American in the room is laughing, so this worked. Oh, yeah, okay, but you live in the US. I thought that would never happen to me, by the way. Until I was making this presentation, I was reflecting on life, as you do after writing a terrible abstract. And I found this picture from like 2013. This is my rearview mirror. This is my friend's car. And we were going from Belgium to the Netherlands. Now, Belgium has roads, absolutely do, but they kept getting more narrow, and I kept following GPS trying to get home. I was like, yeah, but certainly this machine is going to tell me where to go, until the moment that the only being I could ask for directions was this cow. So while I think I will never drive into a body of water, I will gladly apparently end up on a farm somewhere. Now, this is all just still pretty normal automation. I also promise I have a bunch of Gen AI stuff, and one of them is GitHub Copilot. Who uses Copilot or any other kind of coding agent, coding tool? Yeah, bunch of you. It is very happy to tell you what to do. It's very happy to propose to you many lines of code. So what I'm going to show you is just an example that I made where it's going to propose something quite silly, but also, well, maybe more than quite silly. What I'm doing is I just have a piece of text. I'm trying to make it generate code that I like, so I'm asking it, let's print this out on screen, basic stuff, console, write line. I'm going to ask it, let's sort this text alphabetically. Now, most of you know with C#, any other language, you would just do text.sort or something like that, but I make a function and then let Copilot fill it out to see what it makes. This is what it made. Who knows what this algorithm is called? Bubble sort. You were getting every question right so far. What is the one thing bubble sort is good for? Slowing down, or yes, but it's one of the easiest sorting algorithms that you have, so it's used for educational purposes only. Every time you teach somebody how to write bubble sort, you follow that up with, now never do that again. But Copilot works on a bunch of data, and where are we making our homework these days? If you're at school, you're probably putting your homework on GitHub. So it has a bunch of examples of how to do it wrong. You might get something you never wanted. Still, not a very bad thing, but it is confusing. And as a junior developer, you might not know that this is not the way to go. So one of the things for this presentation that I decided, I will leave out stuff where it gets really serious, like mass loss of life, that kind of stuff. It's a tech conference, that wouldn't be fun. So in the example I'm going to show you, nobody died, but it almost went too far. Again, a US example. That's not a pattern. But this is the case. It's just a very well-studied case of where something really bad almost happened through automation bias. And the case is that of Pablo Garcia. Pablo Garcia is a 6-year-old boy, well, he's older now, was a 6-year-old boy who had a disease, very rare disease, where he was very likely to get infections through bacteria. It's not great, and he was scheduled for a routine colonoscopy, which, by the way, I never think those two words should be together. Routine colonoscopy doesn't sound right to me, but for him, this was a routine colonoscopy. So what happens, he goes to the hospital, and the doctor prescribes to him medication, a single pill of 160 milligrams, that would make sure that that infection was much less likely to happen. So, the doctor writes that down, the doctor brings it to the pharmacist enters into the system, 160 milligrams. So far, so good. But here's where we go into automation. Because that system has a different setting for that particular medication. That system accepts milligrams per kilogram of body weight. Pablo weighs 38.5 kilos. So what do you get? A robot goes out to get not one, but 38.5 pills. What I imagine is a bowl of pills. That robot will have been zipping back and forth. How did that happen? The doctor did get a notification, but the doctor got 400 that day, so dismissed it. The pharmacist did remember something, because it's a very well-studied case, something about that system saying something about doses. But yeah, the doctor said 160 milligrams, let's go. The robot didn't think. Just got it out. Now you might think there's no way Pablo was going to get those pills, but in this case, depending on which researcher you use, it's either a junior nurse or a floating nurse. Floating nurse meaning they were just helping out at a department where they were understaffed, so they were not familiar with Pablo's case. They were not equipped to see, is this the right amount of medication for what's going to be needed? So they go and give this to Pablo. But of course, Pablo doesn't take 38 38 and a half pills. Except his mother told him, we're going to the hospital again, and you probably have to take a lot of pills, honey. So he did. Went into shock and was barely saved. Within an inch of dying, was saved and stabilized. But this is one of those cases where automation bias goes absolutely bonkers wrong. And we're going to go, when I start talking about why we suffer from this, we're going to go into some of the reasons that really influence this. But basically the hint is here. A lot of different people involved, and not all of them were equally responsible. So that's one of those cases where it goes really wrong. So, back to more light examples. I like to use Google as an example. Google used to be a really good search engine, and we've been trained to know that Google is where you find stuff. It's not that great anymore, and one of the ways that we have errors of omission is when you Google something. We even made it into a verb. When you Google something, the answers on the first page might not be the most factual. They might not be truthful, but they are very semantically relevant to what you are searching. But here's a moment of honesty. Who of you has gone to the second or third page of Google in the last week? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, I'm counting at like 10 people. In my last room 2 days ago, there was 1 in 40 who actually remembers going to the second or third page, because that's where a lot of the good stuff is, but we're trained, here's the results, right? That confirmation bias also sets in. We're not an automation bias because we're not equipped to review this, so we just accept it. There's also errors of omission happening with this search engine, because if you look for a certain product, for instance, the first thing you get is a bunch of a bunch of companies that have paid Google that may have this product or not, but they've paid Google enough to be there. Then a bunch of things that look like search results, but are not because people paid Google. And then a map with pins of companies that paid Google. So before you even get to the point where the results might start, you've already been shown a lot of stuff that is not relevant or is not the answer that you want to be looking for. Most of us have an ad blocker installed, but I'm thinking about older generations. Are they equally equipped to deal with that? But one thing I like the most about Google is they sort of missed the generative AI boat. They're catching up, they're almost caught up, but at the start, the first thing that they did in Google, the search engine, was build AI Overview. And that was so good at the beginning. Because if you asked AI Overview, it tried not to just tell you what it found, it tried to explain it to you. So if you asked it, smoking while pregnant, it would give you weird recommendations. And there's plenty of these examples, by the way. It's really fun. Just go look at this. Taro is a root that you use in Asian cuisine. And how long should you boil that? 15, 20 minutes, 1.5 hours, or just until it's tender. I don't know. It's trying to explain you all of the stuff it found and it's just telling you, I don't know. But instead of saying, I don't know, this is what you get. If you ever wondered how many rocks you should eat, Google had an answer. But Google was like, hey, stop, you're making a meme out of our product. Except for these 3. These were definitely true. And then this one is my favorite one. If you have the problem that cheese slides off your pizza, you get this beautiful explanation, looks really good, human, recipe-like, except, here's the thing. They also tell you just add some glue. This is because it's like a 15-year-old Reddit post where somebody joked about this, they found it, they threw it in there, and telling users this is what you should do. Now, this is Google. They're not the only one to blame. We also love fooling ourselves. One of the ways that we do that is by making test suites, right? And everything you test shows something works, but the stuff that you don't test is usually where the fault is. So you have unit tests, it shows the system works, but you don't have integration tests, so it might not be working. You have your integration tests, but everything turns out to be really slow. So we keep on fooling ourselves with the tests that we have. Don't stop writing tests, but look at, do we have everything, and review that. But that's difficult. There's also one more thing that I'll show is an error of omission in Gen AI. This is difficult because GPT likes to chat a lot, so it's usually telling you too much, and it's not happening that often where it just leaves something out. But imagine that you're an intern at a company, but it's 2025 and you have GitHub Copilot. And you are working with all these amazing people, and suddenly the team gets a ticket where somebody presses a button and the whole website goes down. Customer service says that, but your super senior team lead has it figured out. It's in the do stuff method, and it's a very obvious error. So let's put the intern on it. And you, the intern, or let's say me, the intern, says, I'm on it. I don't know what I'm doing at this point, but I know where the method is, and I have GitHub Copilot. So let's go to that method. Most of you will immediately see what's going on, right? But this is actual code, and it's an actual example of where Copilot gets it spectacularly wrong. Do stuff calls do stuff calls do stuff calls do stuff, and if I keep saying that, you'll walk out, and that's a Stack Overflow exception, right? So the fix might not be super simple, but if you don't know what you're doing and you've got Copilot, you might do this. You'll just go in, and you'll say, let me select this text, Control-I, and fix the obvious error. And it says, let me do that for you, because you spelled do stuff with a lowercase d. And of course, we are not falling for this, but if you're new at a job and you've got Copilot, the best tool ever to be around since sliced bread, you might fall for this. The right answer would have been, hey, let's fix this infinite recursion. Oh, by the way, you also have a naming error. But it doesn't do that. It just goes, here's something, let's fix it. It's not telling you the real problem. But with all those examples behind us, let's talk a little bit about where this comes from. Why do we suffer from this automation bias? And the first and most important, well, there's two equally important ones, but the first one that I'll mention is social aspects and accountability. We go back to the example of Pablo, because they did it was a well-studied example, and eventually they said the hospital was responsible. Hospital is not a person, right? They didn't say the doctor was responsible, even though they should have been. The pharmacist wasn't responsible, even though they should have known the system and should have known how to work with it. The robot was not responsible. Fair enough. I'll give the robot some credit. The nurse was not responsible, although a bowl of pills is probably an insane amount to give to a 6-year-old. I only think that the 6-year-old probably wasn't responsible. But how many teams aren't built like this, where we're building one product with 8 teams, something breaks? Who did it? Right? We even made it the motto of DevOps. You build it, you run it. That means the team. But that also means that if the whole team is responsible, nobody's really taking responsibility. And this is where automation bias comes in. We sort of have that feeling like, they'll figure it out. Or that team did something wrong too, so I'm fine. This is one big problem with automation bias. You need to trigger that critical thinking, and that doesn't happen if we're all responsible for an outcome. This also ties into a study I read that was done this year. It's called Your Brain on ChatGPT. It's where they tested a bunch of interesting things, but one of the outcomes was, how much do we feel a piece of work is ours? And they tested this with 3 groups. One group had to write an essay just using no internet, word processor, keyboard. Done, that's it. The second group got to use a search engine. And the third group used ChatGPT. What they found is that first group, who had to do everything themselves and just work, the brain-only group, felt a strong attachment to the essay they wrote. It was a part of them. They worked hard on this. The search engine group, a little less so. They still felt like they put in a lot of work and they felt some connection to it. It's a bit like how I used to make my homework, just search stuff, throw it in. But at least there was some ownership still. The ChatGPT group, not at all. They couldn't even quote from the document that they had just made and put in as their homework. That ownership does not help with automation bias. You're not more likely to review something if something just was generated and you go, looks good to me. And I personally feel this when I write code with Copilot. It feels very ephemeral. It feels like something, if it's not good, I'll make 10 new versions of it later. It's fine. It's not really mine. But that doesn't help if we are asked to critically review something. But one of the biggest causes of our automation bias is an interesting one. It's where task complexity meets time. If you have a task that you need to do, and it takes 15 minutes, and I'm telling you, do it in 10, pressure builds, our cognitive capabilities go down, that's just what stress does, and we're more likely to make a mistake. If I would leave the time the same, but would give you a much more complex task, or the task suddenly explodes in complexity, same thing happens. Stress, don't know how to deal with it, we don't review well enough. The problem here, and maybe you've noticed already, is the stuff that we like to automate is the stuff that's complex or takes a lot of time. So we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot here, but trying to automate the stuff that really we don't have the cognitive capability to review, because we're trying to solve it with automation where we should really be just investing more time in taking more time, or figuring out how to reduce complexity. I think this is one of those things where, take for instance, why should we have agents? Why should we have ChatGPT? People say, well, it won't take your job, but you'll be able to do so much more. Because that's what we're doing, right? We're not taking a day off because you have a Copilot license. No, we're getting more stuff done. We're getting a lot more complex stuff done in a lot less time. We're just not very good at reviewing this. And there was also one study that I really liked. It also mentioned personality aspects in combination with automation bias. So this might not sound like good news, but let me get this. If you suffer from neuroticism, so emotional instability, irritability, anxiety, self-doubt, depression, not great stuff, there is a silver lining. You are less susceptible to automation bias. Your brain is apparently constantly in this critical thinking mode, and that helps you review that output or any kind of recommendation from a machine much better than somebody who just goes through life quite happy. Now, still, you have neuroticism, this is not great, but there is a silver lining. The one thing I like the most, though, is if you are an extrovert, which I'm not. I know I'm here, spotlight and everything, but after this, I'm going to lie down for a moment. If you are an extrovert, you suffer more from automation bias. If you're an introvert, you have some sort of inbuilt defense against it. Not perfect, but it helps a little bit. So I like that. Still, I made world's worst abstract, so it didn't exactly work for me, but there are some things that help that are just in your personality, which I find very interesting. There's some stuff that we can do to fix it, though. There's stuff that you can do to fix it, which is more interesting. The simplest things that we usually think of on how to fix it are these three. Keeping a human in the loop is perhaps, after agentic AI, the thing you hear the most at this conference. Keep human in the loop. Just make higher system accuracy is one that people often come up with. And then there's train people to use the system, train people to use the software. And all of these are exceptionally wrong, which is weird, except for human in the loop. Human in the loop doesn't solve it. Human in the loop solves a very specific problem. If Rollo makes a mistake with the software that I built that uses a model from OpenAI that plainly lied to him, it's Rollo's fault. He's the human in the loop. It solves a legal issue. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't be reviewing output from agents, but it's not the salvation for automation bias. It doesn't help us. Higher system accuracy is like your colleague saying, have we tried writing this without bugs? Shall we just try making less bugs? That's higher system accuracy. Yes, less errors happen, but we're still not better equipped to review them, so this helps no one. The one thing that stumped me, though, was training, because I believed so much that this would solve it. And early research shows that maybe it did, but that was flushed away with a bunch more research that showed it does not at all. Turns out, if you tell a group of people how a system works, even if that includes system gets it wrong a lot, they become more confident in using that system. And it's the confidence that makes us think, we know how this works, it'll be fine. And that plays into that automation bias, and that makes you more susceptible to errors. So training, while you should probably train some people on some software, does not help in battling those errors caused by automation bias. There's one study that I love quoting in this redemption tour, and that is that if you explain to a group of people, any people, how automation bias works, they become more susceptible to automation bias. I have made you worse people. I'm so sorry. But we will attempt to fix this, okay? We're going to talk about what does work. And there's some interesting things there. So basically, you're a captive audience now, because if you leave now, you're worse off. Now, the one thing that really, really, really matters is that if you have some kind of metric on how likely this response is to be wrong, post it in a big font, red letters, big explosions, nice GIF underneath it. Do something that really pops up with it's 10% likely to be wrong, for instance, or it's 20% likely to be wrong. And this is something that in classical machine learning, if you do inference, you usually have inference plus a probability. It's awesome. You could use that, post it. The problem with Gen AI is that we don't have for every inference how likely it is to be right, but we do have those statistics on the model level. So you could use that. So this is just some statistics of all the different models on Azure. You could use those in your software to show people, hey, it's very likely that this, what I just showed you, is wrong. And even though it's only on the model level, I think it's lazy what vendors are doing now. Because what vendors are doing now, this is ChatGPT, there's no metrics, there's just this. Can make mistakes, check important info. So then maybe GitHub Copilot does better. This was in the preview mode of agents, powered by AI, mistakes possible, review carefully. So I thought, but this is the preview, so they probably do better now. No, it's just become a lot less. Basically, they're asking you to do your homework. And this is my message to those vendors. Better people have tried. All my teachers have tried to make me do my homework. Did not work. This is not enough. You have metrics. Why are we not posting them? Because they want us to use more of this, something with a bubble. But this is not enough, and I find that quite lazy. Another thing that works, and this one is one of those more obvious things that all of us or most of us are already using, is the 4 eyes principle. So you make something and you send it to a teammate, send it to a colleague for review. But that is also where the danger lies. If you write a piece of code with GitHub Copilot, or you write an abstract, for instance, let's use that example. You write an abstract with AI. You know it's going to be reviewed by someone, but I don't know who. Now I know. Now I know. He shamed me for it. But I didn't know before, so I'm not likely to do a very good job on it because I have no clue who these people are. So I just send in something, don't do a great job on it. But if you do know who you're sending this to, you make a piece of code, whether you write it yourself or use Copilot, you know these people, it's a peer, it's a colleague, you're more likely to do a better job. Even more so if you respect these people, which I hope for your colleagues is what's happening. You're more likely to do a good job because you don't want them to look bad at you, you want to take some work off their hands, so you're just more likely to do the right thing. So 4 eyes principle actually works against automation bias. And this one is one that we all get wrong with Gen AI. Research shows that if you show a person, here's a decision to be made, here's the information I found, that triggers that critical thinking that we need to really gauge the output of, like, what is it that I have here and what am I going to do with it? But if you do what we do mostly now, chatbots, agents, we use that information and we say, here's the thing that you need to solve, this is the recommendation. And that becomes dangerous because it's very easy, especially when time and complexity come into play, to say, I'm just going to grab what the machine said because that's likely to be right. Right? Luckily with that AMS algorithm didn't happen, but unfortunately did crash a government once. So offering information, not recommendation. This is something you can also do if you're building any kind of agent. Remember this one. Now for me, I still don't do short form writing very well, so I still end up doing that using generative AI. However, I don't use ChatGPT anymore. What I now do is I do what software developers do. I built a whole tool for it. But that tool only does one thing, and it does one thing pretty well, and that's writing abstracts. So I want to show you what that looks like. So, oh, by the way, this is a public repo. You can use this. It has some instructions on if you're going to use it, how to make it sound less like me and more like you. But everything I made was in GitHub. It doesn't have to be GitHub. You could run this in a container somewhere. The code is just Python. It's really simple. Steal it, please. What I do is I have a lot of issues. Nobody laughed at that joke. Good. Every issue is basically, thank you, Rollo. I can always count on you. Every issue contains an abstract that I wanted to generate. So you'll eventually find, this is what we're talking about right now. It made it somehow to this conference. Every time I write an abstract now, the first thing that happens is I'm asked to fill out these fields. So let's go. These 4 questions, they're not made by me, they're made by an actual expert. The guy's name is Arthur Doler. He speaks at a bunch of conferences, really good psychology talks, and he told me these are the 4 things that I have to answer before I write an abstract, because otherwise I have no business writing any of this. So who do you think this talk is for, right? Who's your audience? What do you think people will learn from this talk? And the beauty about this is it can just be a bulleted list, or it could be me rambling. I could probably transcribe it just from talking to my computer. Doesn't have to be pretty. This is, if you believe in write drunk, edit sober, this is writing drunk. It's lovely. But you need to be able to answer these questions. What is something you will be able to do when you walk out of the door? Something I want to be able to answer because that's what you can actually feel empowered with when you go and do something with this. And then a 2-sentence summary of the talk. Doesn't even have to be grammatically correct. But if you can't answer these 4, this expert says, don't do it. If you can't answer these 4, cancel button's right there. So what happens when you have one of these is you get an issue, and then by magic, you also get a pull request. Now, of course, that's not real magic. What is happening is there's a workflow that starts when I make one of these issues, and the first thing I do is I have a prompt that actually goes and makes an abstract. That prompt We're not going to go into prompt engineering here, but that prompt really has a few instructions about what I like in an abstract, but then it has a bunch of examples. Examples that I've made before, abstracts that I've wrote, and then I added just the questions and the answers in retrospect. That allows me to make sure that there's enough examples so that it sounds like me, but I don't have to do a lot of explaining to what it is that I want to do. The cool thing about this is it's just a pull request, which will later help me with the reviewing. The pull request generates an abstract, easy peasy, but then I need to still prompt myself to review well. So what I do is I have a couple of things going on. The first thing is Gen AI, but it's the last time we'll see Gen AI here. So the first thing is I have a prompt that only offers information, no recommendation. The only thing I've asked this thing to do is here's the questions and answers, here is the abstract. Look at every question. Did the answer make it into the abstract? Just tell me where. Or if not, just tell me it didn't. Do not rewrite, do not recommend, do not offer an opinion. Do not really offer an opinion because it's so likely to become chatty, but you just have to keep saying, do not offer opinion. That helps, especially when something is missing. Next up, Dylan Beatty, who also speaks at this conference, has a great video called Delving into the Landscape. You should watch it. It goes into data science about what GPT thinks an abstract is. So words like delve, landscape, equip, insight, they're very likely to go into these abstracts. What I have here is just a very deterministic step that checks, is that in there? Just a trigger in me like, oh, I have to review this. I have to look carefully. The next thing it does is it checks like M dashes. Look at the agenda of this conference, count the M dashes, it's around 42. It is not a bad thing, it's just one of those signs that it made it in and we're not editing it. Last thing I add is metrics. And this is sort of what you should do. I could make it red. But big warning stating, hey, this is what's going on here. We're using this model, this is what it means, these are the metrics, this is what those metric means. So that if you start using this, every time you make something, you'll get a big warning saying, hey, please, for the love of God, review it. It works for me because I've been making a bunch of commits where I do the necessary stuff that the review found, but also stuff that I just like in my abstracts to be a little bit more informal. So it's been a really good way for me to become a better reviewer and make better abstracts. So, a few things in conclusion. That critical thinking part is really hard to trigger, but for me, it's in the content, it's the reviews, it's adding more determinism, and learning about automation bias and why I'm so bad at reviewing this stuff really helped in making better software. The fact that it's a pull request also makes sure there's that 4 eyes principle, but I'm also not rushed. I don't have to finish this session, it's just there. If I write something, I can come back to it in an hour and review it. Information versus recommendation, which I really hope we will all start using in these chatbots and agents that we're building, because that's really where I think the problem is going to lie in the next 2 years. Of course, this is still automation. I do realize it's a silly thing, but we're not going to suddenly throw away generative AI because we're not equipped to handle it. It's going to be pushed to us. The cat is out of the bag. Let's use it, but let's become more responsible in how we use it. The biggest point, I guess, that I want to drive home. This year was the year of agents, where we all try to figure out how this stuff worked. Every second session here is about agents. Next year will be no different. But I hope that when you start making agents that use language models that are as good at writing poems as they are supposedly at running our business processes, that you will help the people that you expose them to review the output better. If we can do that, we'll be fine. If you want any of this, this is the research I use the most. Anything else I said, if you think, hey, was that right? Send me a message by email or LinkedIn. I will send you back the research that I did with pen and paper on a tablet, no AI. I hope you have a lovely time at Build Stuff. Thanks for having me this second year, and just please enjoy. Thank you.